In a future ravaged by severe drought, the USA has become a place where people are willing to kill for water. Most have left, but Ernest Holm insists on staying with his family, believing that with water, the land will flourish once again. His son, Jerome, has no memory of the green past his father recalls. One day, two thieves attempt to break into a small building on their farm by burning the lock. Ernest catches them and opens fire, killing one of the thieves when he tries to shoot back. The second thief begs for mercy, claiming he thought there was water and reaching for his pants, only for Ernest to spot a gun and shoot him first. Jerome, watching from a distance, offers to help, but Ernest dismisses him, asking only to be called Dad instead of his first name. After the altercation, Ernest unlocks the building, revealing a pump that, unfortunately, produces no water. They push their mule to continue without drinking as they meet the Watermen, a group controlling the region's water supply through a government deal. Ernest trades supplies for water, warning Jerome not to provoke them since they're dangerous. Ernest often tries to convince the Watermen to provide water for their farm, but the price is always too high. On the way home, their mule collapses, and Ernest, seeing the animal's pain, puts it down. Jerome cries but swears he could have done it himself. Back at the farm, they eat MREs, served by Jerome's sister Mary, who secretly meets with her boyfriend through a window escape. The next day, Ernest and Jerome go to an auction, hoping to bid on a robot called Simulate Shadow, or Sim, to replace their lost mule. Sam's son, Flem, fiercely competes against Ernest at the auction for the Simulate Shadow robot, but Ernest ultimately wins, worsening his financial debt. Afterward, Ernest and Jerome visit the hospital where Catherine, the children's mother, is bedridden due to a past accident. A special machine helps her walk, but it's expensive, and the family can't afford it. After spending a peaceful afternoon with Catherine, the father and son head home, encountering a couple, Robbie and Suze, with their baby on the way. Ernest dismisses them as vultures for using their child to seek charity, but later, feeling some compassion, he brings them water. The couple even contemplates selling their baby due to financial struggles, but Ernest convinces them otherwise, promising to provide some assistance. Later, Flem, who turns out to be Mary's secret boyfriend, visits the farm to borrow Sim. Ernest refuses unless Sam signs a guarantee, leading Flem to storm off in frustration, declaring that Ernest will never succeed in irrigating his land. As Ernest and Jerome continue their dealings with the Watermen, their work becomes more efficient with the help of Sim. Ernest tries to persuade the Watermen to consider running a water line to his farm and begins digging up his old pump for inspection. Meanwhile, he urges Jerome to focus on making friends or meeting a girl, though Jerome prefers to stay dedicated to the family. Back at the farm, tensions escalate when Ernest forbids Mary from going out, prompting her to lash out, accusing him of hating her relationship with Flem. She attempts to run away but is stopped by Ernest, who locks her up and nails her window shut. Shortly after, Sim is stolen, and Ernest immediately suspects Flem. He confronts Sam, who reveals Flem left for the mountains earlier that morning. Sam discloses that Ernest's farm used to belong to him, and Flem is obsessed with reclaiming it, though Sam believes the land is barren and water won't help. Ernest goes to investigate in the mountains but is knocked out, later waking up at the Watermen's camp, where he's accused of using Sim to steal their supplies. Ernest denies any involvement in the theft, but Caleb, the Watermen's leader, attacks him. After a fierce struggle, Ernest manages to steal Caleb's knife and a rifle, firing a shot into the air to keep the others at bay before escaping. On his way home, Ernest discovers Flem asleep by the fire with Sim and the stolen supplies nearby, revealing that Flem framed him. At dawn, Ernest wakes Flem with a rifle pointed at him and ties him to Sim, forcing him to march through the heat back to the Watermen. Flem taunts Ernest by mentioning Mary, leading Ernest to punish him by yanking the rope and making him fall. As their journey continues, both men become desperate for water, and Flem convinces Ernest to stop for a drink. However, the supplies contain alcohol, and Ernest, struggling with his addiction, gets drunk while Flem pretends to drink. Flem tries to explain that he stole the machine to survive, offering Ernest money, but his story seems suspicious. Eventually, Flem uses Ernest's drunken state to hit him with a rock, causing Ernest to fall and hit his head, triggering a flashback to Catherine's car accident, which was caused by his drinking. When Ernest regains consciousness, he's tied to Sim, with Flem pouring more alcohol into his mouth and screaming. Flem then heads to the farm, where Mary jumps on his bike to run away with him. Concerned for his father, Jerome sets out to find Ernest and reaches the watermen's camp, where he learns that his father has died, allegedly due to an accident involving the machine. During the funeral, Mary returns, and she and Jerome mourn together. Afterward, they visit their mother to break the tragic news. Flem arrives in a truck to take them back home, and a grief-stricken Jerome starts smashing Sim with a hammer. But Flem intervenes, explaining that grief shouldn't ruin their source of income. He offers to take over as the head of the family, revealing that Mary is pregnant. Flem assures Jerome he has big plans for the farm, and Jerome reluctantly agrees to let him take control. Later, Flem goes to the waterman, demanding a water pipe for the farm. Initially, Caleb refuses, but when Flem blames him for Ernest's death, citing that Caleb's rifle and knife were found with the body, Caleb, fearful of the consequences, agrees to divert water to the siblings' land. A few days after the new pump is installed, Flem works tirelessly to plant and grow wheat, now watered by sprinklers, and the family finally enjoys the luxury of real showers. Weeks later, Jerome is amazed to spot a small leaf sprouting from the ground, and before long, the land is flourishing with lush plants. In celebration, Flem and Mary get married, tattooing each other's initials on their hands. During the wedding party, however, Flem can't stop thinking about Ernest's death as he drinks. A few days later, Sam arrives at the farm with two men from the bank, revealing that Ernest had accumulated a massive debt, and now Flem is responsible for paying it off. Trying to look tough, Flem revs his bike and scares the horses, but Sam reprimands him, explaining that no one ever wanted to buy the land before, and Ernest had stayed simply because he never left. With the farm now thriving thanks to the water and crops, the bank plans to sell it unless Flem pays the debt. That night, Flem loads Sim onto his truck and picks up Robbie and his baby, pretending they'll just be asking around for price estimates. However, Flem has no intention of seeking prices. He secretly sells the baby without Robbie's consent. When Robbie realizes what's happening, he panics and demands his baby back, but the buyers open fire, killing him. They also shoot at Flem, who fires back and escapes, leaving Sim behind in the chaos. The machine is damaged in the crossfire and accidentally activates a mode that directs it back to the original factory. The next day, Flem uses the money from selling the baby to pay the bank, but lies to Jerome and Mary, claiming he sold Sim to Robbie instead. Meanwhile, Sim reaches the city and is found by its creator, Calvin, who locates the owner's information and contacts the farm. Jerome answers the call and grows suspicious, prompting him to head to the local market. There, he sees Flem talking to Suze, who is cradling a doll as if it were her baby. Alarmed, Jerome tries to approach them, but Flem quickly ushers Suze away. Back at the farm, Jerome confronts Flem about Robbie, but Flem lies, claiming that Robbie took Sim and abandoned his family. Determined to uncover the truth, Jerome tells Flem he's going to visit his mother, but instead takes a bus to the border. Unable to cross due to being a minor, Jerome meets Anna, who offers to help him cross in exchange for payment. Jerome agrees, and she hides him in a truck full of chickens. Once in the city, Anna guides him to the factory where Sim was built, but she only takes half the money, explaining that he won't need help on the way back. Before leaving, Jerome asks if she knows anyone named Ernest, but she doesn't. At the factory, Calvin shows Jerome Sim's built-in cameras, which have recorded everything the machine has seen. Jerome is overwhelmed with emotion when he sees footage of his father, but his grief turns to horror as he discovers that Flem murdered Ernest. The footage reveals that Flem tied Ernest to Sim and sent the machine toward the watermen's camp, making it appear as though Sim had lost control, dragging Ernest to his death. Jerome has a breakdown in the factory. That evening, it starts raining on the farm for the first time in over a decade. Jerome returns, pretending everything is normal, and casually asks Flem how Sim was recovered. Confused, Flem checks the barn and is shocked to see Sim undamaged. Flem assumes Robbie must have returned it out of guilt. Days later, Jerome visits his mother for real, vowing to take care of her like Ernest did. One afternoon, Flem and Jerome go hunting to protect their crops. Flem misses every shot and hands the rifle to Jerome, blaming the gun. Jerome is tempted to shoot Flem but instead kills a deer, showing that Flem's aim was the problem. Back at the farm, Jerome hides the rifle in his room, and during lunch he lies, saying he received a call from Robbie, who is looking for Flem. This provokes Flem, who angrily accuses Jerome of lying. Mary reprimands Jerome for his attitude, but he insists he's telling the truth, which prompts Flem to storm out of the room. The next day, Flem receives a letter forged by Jerome, pretending to be Robbie, asking Flem to meet him at the cliffs, claiming he's in trouble. Before leaving, Flem searches for the rifle, but Jerome explains he took it to be repaired since Flem said it wasn't working properly. Forced to play along, Flem apologizes for his previous outburst and grabs a knife before heading to the cliffs with Sim. Once there, he calls out for Robbie, only to fall into a hidden pit, breaking his legs. In agony, Flem pleads for Sim's help, but the machine cannot understand. Jerome then appears, holding a rock, and Flem realizes that Jerome knows the truth about Ernest's death. Desperate, Flem begs for mercy, but Jerome silently watches as Flem suffers under the scorching sun. Flem, in a last-ditch effort, pleads with Jerome to think of Mary and the baby, giving a long speech about accidents and regret. This angers Jerome, and in a fit of rage, he shoots and kills Flem. When Jerome returns home, he lets Mary believe that Flem abandoned her, keeping the truth about their father's death to himself. With the money from their crops, the siblings are finally able to afford real food, and they agree it's time to buy the machine to bring their mother, Catherine, home. Jerome then erases all the footage from Sim, signaling his readiness to move forward and start fresh.